while we're talking about politics, why don't we focus on the economy? And the most important thing is what puts food on people's tables, what allows others to build infrastructure. We've been hearing for so many years about how Africa is supposed to be rich. But when you look at the living conditions of the people, when you experience the daily life, the misery, the poverty of sub-Saharan Africans, we wonder where this wealth everyone talks about actually is. You end up not believing in it anymore, and yet it does exist, very real and tangible. It's the way it's exploited that explains this gap, this difficult situation for people. And it's to draw the attention of Africans and the whole world to this issue, especially minerals, resources underground, that we started this initiative a year ago and a half without any great pretension, with the mission of showing the reality, the one that is accessible to us. And what we discover every day only strengthens our belief that it is urgent for Africans, especially those in sub-Saharan Africa, to become aware of the immense gift that nature has given them. And that the younger generations do everything they can to put an end to the plundering they are subjected to. Their parents didn't know. They were unaware of the importance of these millennia. It didn't mean much to them. They, more educated and more open to the world, know it. They cannot allow this absurdity to continue. In previous episodes, we saw in Eastern DRC just how much Congo was being plundered. Its cobalt, its coltan, its copper, its gold stolen. With its people enslaved by the Chinese and other predators, with the complicity of some of its local officials, its politicians, its elite, but also by its Rwandan neighbor. We then went to the Bauxite area in Guinea, where we witnessed the same phenomenon with the same open-air looters, but with a clear determination from the new military authorities to put an end to it. In this episode, the second part of our series, The Mines of Guinea, we head to one of the most promising areas in forested Guinea in the southeast of the country. So now the journey begins. I invite you to follow us. It's a perilous journey, and honestly, we're a little bit scared. There's a knot in our stomachs because the people on the other side are not exactly saints. Here we are in Simandu, the Simandu mountain range, which stretches 110 kilometers from north to south. It is located south of the Kankan region and north of the Nzeri-Kora region. Look at this immense mountain range. Look at how majestic it is. You might say, looking at it, that there are so many others like it in various regions of our vast and beautiful African continent. And that's exactly how Guineans saw it until a certain time. A beautiful landscape. But it's not just this landscape that I'm asking you to observe, you might be thinking. It's what this place holds within it. We are at Mount Simandu, and believe it or not, we are at the best mineral deposit in the world. The largest unexploited reserve of high-quality iron ore in the world, with more than 1,800,000,000 tons of reserves, with an iron content higher than 65.5%. In other words, part of the world's future is at stake here, when you consider the importance of iron on our developing planet. Since it's used in the production of steel, which is perfect for making washing machines, cars, bridges, skyscrapers, and much more. It is certainly one of the most widely used minerals in the world on a daily basis. The whole planet needs it, and we are in the country with one of the largest deposits in the world. It must benefit the Guinean people. Those who are here must stop seeing it as just a stone. The largest deposit in the world, and it is in this Guinea, often portrayed as so poor and so miserable, that the bulk of this wealth is found. This single peak where we are standing, which rises to 1,658 meters in the southern part of the range, holds 3 billion tons of reserves. Today we invite you to the great Simandu mine. When people talk about Africa's wealth, most people wonder what it actually looks like. It's always very, very abstract. When we talk about the wealth beneath Africa's soil, we ask ourselves, what is it really? This story, just travel across the continent and you'll see it. You only have to arrive in certain places to understand just how richly we have been endowed. riches that we do not exploit. And look, you just have to go to the side of this road to see high-grade iron ore. It hasn't even been processed yet. It's everywhere, everywhere. When you move around that rock in the square, that's iron. There's iron everywhere. But unfortunately, Guineans have not been able to benefit from it for 65 years. Because some clever people who let the slugs live, plundered and confiscated them, now, up until a certain date. That's what the politicians sign off on. They had given it to someone for 35 years. Afterwards, they were going to give them these infrastructures, which are very beautiful, on this enormous mountain packed with iron ore. Someone was going to exploit them for 35 years and then say, I'll give you the infrastructure. Except that after 35 years, there won't be much left. None of us will know. But it's at that very moment that we'll see what's left there. That's why it's interesting, urgent, and vital to look into the contracts and keep pressure on the leaders so that they revisit them. The story of the Simandou mine is a caricatured example of the negligence of some of our leaders and the dispossession, the plundering of which Africa is still a victim. And it deserves to be known by the younger generations so they can set things right. It all begins under the first president, Ahmed Sékou Touré. The great nationalist, fiercely protective of his country's interests, was informed of the existence of this iron ore. But no one tells him how important it is. At that time, in the 1970s, the leader did not have the human resources to scientifically launch research to determine the significance of the deposit. Nevertheless, he created Amifer Ginimba, whose mission was to carry out quantitative and qualitative assessment studies of the Simandou and Nimba resources and to prepare the terms for the construction and exploitation of these resources. The Japanese company Nipponko was tasked with conducting the studies. Unfortunately, the inability to raise the billions of dollars required to finance the essential investments for exploiting the deposits, combined with the corruption of certain leaders, would cripple the project. Worse still, the Japanese company would go on to sell the study to the Brazilian company Vale, which would become the world leader in iron. With Lansana Conté coming to power after the death of Sékou Touré, things would only get worse. In 1997, on the advice of his minister Fassime Profana, President Lansana Conté decided to grant Rio Tinto an exploration permit for the entire Simandou mountain range, which is made up of 4 blocks. They were granted the entire thing, imagine, for 35 years starting from the beginning of operations. They didn't have to pay anything for this allocation. According to this contract, it would take 35 years before the railway and port infrastructure would revert to the Republic of Guinea. And already, from experience, after 35 years, the rails become worthless for projects that are supposed to be worth 9 billion. In today's dollars, 35 years later, with inflation, you're looking at tens of multiple billions of dollars. Guinea will technically not be able to take back and rebuild its railway infrastructure. Rio Tinto, which has hit the jackpot here, on the other hand, commits to developing the mine and exporting Guinean iron within the next 5 years. If it does not meet its commitment within the deadline, it must return the mines. And yet, Rio Tinto won't even put a single shovel in the ground. Nothing gets done. In reality, it signed the deal so it could raise funds on the international market. When after 5 years, the date of the first retrocession imposed by the Guinean Mining Code, they ask it to leave, it bribes a few dignitaries and keeps the blocks. From that point on, everything becomes extremely murky. Nothing is done legally anymore. Rio Tinto uses its connections to drag out the project. It has good relations with President Lansana Conté. All of this is done in total violation of all the rules and procedures for obtaining a concession, such as the presentation of a feasibility study, the acceptance of the study by the ministry, the negotiation with an interministerial committee, the vote in the Council of Ministers, the signing of a presidential decree, and the approval of said decree by the National Assembly. Basically, we're in a state of total illegality. But under Lansana Conté, Rio Tinto during this period has nothing to fear. And since Rio Tinto knows that no one is going to upset him, he is in a very slow hurry to do research. In any case, the 35-year countdown will only start when he has begun selling iron on the international market. In the meantime, the enormous reserve mainly serves this giant to boost its stock market value. From 2002 to 2007, it uses the excuse of needing to conduct more geological research, to discover enough ore to economically justify the development of the mine, but especially the railway and port infrastructure. It claims to have discovered only 2.5 billion tons of rather mediocre grade, that this cannot support the cost of development. He's buying time, but he didn't see it coming, a phenomenon that will expose his big lie. The global economic crisis that shook the world in 2007 will force him, Rio Tinto, seriously shaken, to lay off tens of thousands of employees around the world. The mining giant is reeling. This is the moment for its rival, BHP Billiton, to seize the opportunity to buy it out. They make an offer of $45 billion for a complete takeover. A takeover bid that Rio Tinto naturally cannot accept. But if he doesn't want this to happen, he is forced, as required. The rule is to publish its actual results on Simandou to its stock market regulators in England and the United States. And here comes a big surprise. Rio Tinto declares, brace yourselves, between 8 and 11 billion tons of reserves at very high grades. A quick calculation immediately puts the value of Simandou alone among Rio's assets between $48 and $66 billion. This allowed Rio Tinto to escape the clutches of BHP. But while it managed not to be swallowed up, at the same time, the Guineans discovered the vast lie of the mining giant, which had made them believe that the Simandou reserve was only 2.5 billion tons, with a very low grade. It had simply reduced the value of Simandou by almost a factor of 5. Lansana Conté, realizing he had been lied to and that Rio Tinto had mocked the Guineans, decided to take back the Simandou mines. Rio Tinto resisted and threatened. It used all its influence to prevent this repossession, even though it knew perfectly well that it had never done anything on the site and was entirely at fault. The mine had served its purpose, only for speculation on the international financial market. After a bitter legal battle and lobbying, the Guinean government settled for dividing Simandou into 2 blocks. It left blocks 3 and 4 and took back blocks 1 and 2. Rio Tinto said it did not recognize this division. Yet the authorities could have taken everything back. Rio Tinto, still as arrogant as ever, threatens any company tempted to take over these 2 blocks with legal action. They make it known that any company interested in these blocks would be sued under the Anglo-Saxon legal doctrine of tortious interference. Interference. So Simandou remains frozen because no serious player dares to go near it. Rio Tinto is not just anybody in the mining world. The property of the Guinean people is once again blocked by an international firm. But then another player arrives, one who isn't even afraid of Rio Tinto. BSGR, founded by Benny Steinmetz, an Israeli billionaire who made his fortune in diamonds, and who seems determined to secure the exploitation rights to Simandou. He has been in the country for a few years, and despite the setbacks he has faced, he has been more effective at delivering results, notably in the stock market sector, but also in iron. He has been more respectful of his commitments to the Guinean state, to whom he has brought in several $100 million. So quite naturally, people are willing to listen to him closely. And once again, he will take advantage of the greed and corruption that characterize the local political scene. He exploits the weaknesses of our leaders. Since he has access to the palace, when he senses that the old president Lansana Conté is completely exhausted and ill, he makes his move. After a failed attempt with the first wife, Henriette Conté, BSGR turns to his 4th wife, Mamadie Touré, and showers her with gifts. $8 million. And gets her to obtain from her ailing husband blocks 1 and 2 of Simandou, which had just been reclaimed by the Guinean state. The affair will cause a huge stir. International courts will take up the case with, of course, pressure from the mining giant Rio Tinto, which refuses to lose these 2 blocks. But BSGR holds firm, and under pressure, in order not to suffer the same setbacks as Rio Tinto, and to avoid having these 2 blocks taken away, it decides to partner with a giant in the sector, one that has made a name for itself, notably in the Amazon. The Brazilian group Vale, and immediately they pull off an extraordinary coup. The 2 blocks, purchased initially for less than $100 million, will see IGR resell 51% of its shares to the Brazilian company Vale for $2.5 billion, making a gigantic profit of over $2.4 billion, without the Guinean government gaining the slightest benefit. Yes, you heard that right. They buy for less than $100 million, make a few investments, and then sell 51% of the asset for $2.5 billion. The BSGR Vale partnership is established, and now they have to move quickly so that no one can challenge the deal. Iron must be produced quickly. In 2010, the new Vale BSGR group is forced to renegotiate with the Guinean government, which requires them to rebuild at their own expense. The railway, which was started from Conakry before March 2012, with the commitment to extend the rail line all the way to Kerouane. The government grants them a return of minimal tax concessions. The group throws itself fully into the work. Not Rio Tinto, which remains in a combative stance. Not a single shovel has been lifted on their side, and it is under these conditions that President Alpha Condé comes to power in January 2011. People think that the serious business is finally about to begin. With this intellectual, a university professor who had long denounced waste, corruption, and incompetence in the management of the country's resources. And everything starts off well with the inauguration by the new President Alpha Condé in the presence of Brazilian President Lula of the Conakry Cancan inauguration. BSGR quickly gets to work. They have to move fast since they promised to start production before 2012. Yet shortly after, Alpha Condé halts the work and strangely gives the first 40 kilometers of rail on which construction had already begun to Vincent Bolloré, along with the port concession. Suddenly he goes to war against BSGR. He accuses them of having obtained the two concessions through corruption, which incidentally is true. And curiously, he turns to the Australian company Rio Tinto, which suddenly finds favor in his eyes. He signs an agreement with Rio Tinto in which all their legal violations are wiped clean. All their missteps are forgiven. In return, they pay $700 million to recover blocks 3 and 4. $700 million, which, brace yourselves, never made it into the state coffers. $700 million that simply vanished. They were never clearly traced to the public treasury. We're talking here about the equivalent of 100 reference hospitals. The equivalent of 1,400 kilometers of paved roads in a country that desperately lacks them. Whew! Gone as if by magic. Billionaire Benny Steinmetz cannot accept being sidelined and dispossessed like this, especially since, unlike Rio Tinto, he was already producing iron. He challenges this decision in international court. It's war. Rio Tinto, for its part, is also going all in. They want to get back blocks 1 and 2 that were taken from them. That's why they decide to sue Vale BSGR. That's the glue holding everything together. A marathon trial that Rio Tinto will ultimately lose. Benny Steinmetz is nevertheless sentenced to prison in Switzerland for corruption. The Brazilian company Vale withdraws from the project. Alpha Condé, approached by President Nicolas Sarkozy, eventually negotiates a deal with BSGR. This made it possible to free up blocks 1 and 2 and transfer them to the SMB group of Fadi Wazni, who then became Mr. for Alpha and his son. That's how SMB arrived with Winning, its Singaporean partners financed by China in the Simandou mine.
China has the means to finance the technology. China will support us with infrastructure, especially roads. You know how run down the streets of Guinea are today.
And when you sum up the situation, you have to note that all this confusion, these various schemes, both from local leaders and international firms, has delayed the development of the iron sector in Guinea by a good 10 years and deprived the country of several $1 billion in revenue. Not to mention the Conakry Cancan Kerouane railway and the impact it would have had on the Guinean economy, and the comfort it would have brought to Guineans and Malians who could have come to pick up their goods at the dry port in Cancan. The 35 years still haven't started, despite the fact that it's a contract, an utterly unacceptable situation. Now, on the ground, there are two giants sharing the spoils. Two blocks controlled by the consortium formed by the group. Guinea, Simandou, and Ba'u, two others in the hands of the Australian Rio Tinto, allied with the Chinese Chinalco, which joined the Brazilian by buying its shares for over $2 billion. This is the situation inherited by the military, who overthrew the president, Alpha Condé, on September 5th, 2021.
Guinea is inhabited by a vast mass of many people who are completely unaware of the immense natural wealth and potential of their own country.
Given the importance of the mining sector, which accounts for 99% of Guinean exports, it only makes up 20% of the GDP.
It's been nearly 103 years that we've been extracting our raw materials, and Guinea is the only country in the world that has regressed. In this contract, it would take 35 years before the railway and port infrastructure would be returned to the Republic of Guinea. And already, from experience, after 35 years, the rails become rotten. So for projects that are supposed to be carried out at a value of $9 billion in today's dollars, and 35 years later, with inflation, you're looking at tens of multiple billions of dollars. Guinea will technically not be able to take back and rebuild its infrastructure.
It was under these circumstances that Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, the new transitional president, who had watched our report on mining in Eastern DRC, told me that there were just as many shady dealings in Guinea's mining sector and that he was determined to put an end to all this mismanagement so that finally, Guineans can benefit from this extraordinary wealth.
It is abundantly clear that the legitimate expectations of our people have unfortunately not been fully met, and this is a matter of significant concern. And the government is aware of this. This cannot go on. You and we can no longer continue this game of DIP that perpetuates great inequality in our relations. We must correct it, and the time is now. I invite you to join in this effort. It has become a categorical and non-negotiable imperative.
And we visited the various sites in the interior of the country. After Mosit, we put our report on iron ore on hold since intense negotiations were underway. And we wanted to see if the promised changes would actually be delivered. These were clearly the crown jewels, and the contracts were both highly coveted and complex at the same time.
We had two significant major giants operating in the mining sector, and each with an identical build, operate, transfer agreement to simultaneously build the same critical infrastructure. We had two giants, each with an agreement. Each agreement assigned them specific blocks, which were there generating added value, allowing these companies to gain capital market advantages, but which were not being exploited.
When you read the agreements, you get the feeling that sometimes they really took the Guinean authorities for fools. You see several railways that are only going to be used for transporting minerals. How is it possible to have two different railway networks in the same country and the same region, both dedicated solely to transporting minerals? Isn't that so? It's the responsibility of politicians, of leaders, to at some point decide to say, okay, we don't have the technology, but stop taking us for fools, to renegotiate so that this is exploited here and that it benefits the people. So many inconsistencies have led President Mamadi Doumbouya to impose a renegotiation, to push everyone to come together at the table, to bring order to this big mess that deprives Guineans of their wealth. In reality, even if it won't always please the politicians, who for some would see it as a boost for the current authorities, the politicians naturally are eager to see them leave, these military leaders, to put an end to this transition and return to their own activities. We must acknowledge that the results achieved are remarkable and should prompt reflection on African intellectualism as well, but also on the models of governance in our sub-Saharan nations. I'm not sure that a civilian government would have achieved the progress we've seen, at least in the area of this soft cement mine, where every politician is often more concerned with their own agenda than with the collective interest. Where politicians always give in to the big firms backed by Western powers. President Mamadi Doumbouya summoned, in a very polite yet very military manner, the heads of the mining companies, regardless of their size or origin. These were the people who, until then, had been the masters of the country, who made the rules, who held the government and the entire population hostage. And he gave them an unambiguous ultimatum. Several months later, in the iron sector, he achieved what no one thought possible, since to this day, he has managed to consolidate the Simandu project.
The President of the Republic summoned the CEOs of the companies and gave them ultimatums.
When the esteemed head of state officially formed his new government, he clearly recognized and firmly believed that the Simandu project was indeed the absolutely crucial and pivotal undertaking that should unequivocally enable the nation of Guinea to truly become a rapidly emerging and prosperous country in a very short period of time.
Negotiations started at 6 or 7 in the morning, and we still weren't done by 2 in the morning. And the next day, it was the same all over again. In 3 or 4 days, we signed a framework agreement that allowed us to bring the two companies together in a single entity,
which will allow them to operate these mines, to transport them, and to transport other minerals, other plant products, other agricultural products, other animal products, as well as people, travelers crossing all of Guinea. It's a corridor. I can tell you, just that alone is an incredible breakthrough that we haven't been able to achieve in over 50 years.
We also said that the railway infrastructure will be multi-purpose and multi-service. What does that mean? Initially, these rails were planned just for minerals. But for us, it's a 670-kilometer Trans-Guinean line. If you don't transport people and their goods, agricultural products, what benefit will it bring to Guinea? Laughs. It would benefit the mining companies much more, but nothing for the Republic of Guinea. That's why the head of state asked us to negotiate this aspect. Now the rails are multi-service. People, their goods, agricultural products, and minerals. Multi-purpose, any mining operator who holds a mining permit in this southern corridor of the Republic of Guinea will have the same access as the two partners.
During a meeting, Winnings, for example, said, "We are going to build our own railway." And Rio Tinto said, "We can also build our own railway." The President of the Republic said, "That's out of the question, because you know very well." In this type of operation, the operating account and the profit and loss account don't mean anything. It's the projected cost price that matters. By pooling the project, the government has cut the costs in half. What is remarkable about this negotiation is that it is no longer the state that pays for the law firms and consulting studies, as was the case until now, but the project itself. And now it's a joint venture with the state of Guinea, which has gone from 0% to 15% ownership without spending anything. There's no need to wait 35 years to benefit from the windfall that nature has provided, has given them. There's no need to wait 35 years to enjoy the infrastructure, since the railway will serve everyone. It's the Trans-Guinean.
We negotiated with our partners that these railway and port infrastructures should revert to the Republic of Guinea on day one. That is, as soon as the infrastructures are completed, their management returns to the Republic of Guinea, which can then choose either a national agency or a third-party company to manage them and to repay the investments made by both partners. That's one. Secondly, we said that the state must have 15% of the company's share capital. And this is non-dilutable, it's free. And that's extremely important.
And the issue that has always troubled Guinean leaders working on this matter, the question of financing, now seems to have been resolved. Anyone who comes and tells you, "No, we're going to spend a lot of money," spends because they know they're going to profit. Maybe we should also benefit while they are benefiting. It's a win-win situation, and that's what it's all about. We're not saying that anyone should be kicked out. No, because we don't yet have the technology. We're saying, train us, transfer the technology to us, but at the same time, respect us, and don't wait until we're gone to take advantage of it. To make this project, Simandou, a reality with its port infrastructure, we needed to find $15 billion, an amount that scared everyone, that was seen as insurmountable. Who would be crazy enough to lend to a country so unstable, so poorly managed? No one. The big firms, the mining giants, use these arguments as a pretext, as a weapon to force the Guinean state to give in, just as they do all over the continent. With courage and by diversifying partnerships, after a mission to China in January 2023, the Guinean transitional authorities received assurances from investors. In the end, it was Chinese banks and insurance companies that took the lead. In financing the Simandou project, which could help change Guinea's image, this rich country of poor people, the construction of the 670-kilometer mining railway and the Moribaya export port is logically expected to begin in a few days. And it is scheduled to be completed, according to the timeline, in December 2024. The Australian mining group Rio Tinto, the winning consortium Simandou, and the Chinese steel giant Baowu Steel are set to restart work on the mining railway and the port infrastructure as early as March 2023. At least that's the hope. Provided that the Australian group Rio Tinto, which so far has been dragging things out for several decades, and who continues to drag their feet, finally plays along and joins the others in getting to work. Because for now, the part that hasn't shown any signs of movement is theirs. Blocks 3 and 4. The parent company in Australia is aware that Simfer, which is only its subsidiary in Guinea, is not financially strong or credible enough to sign this agreement on its own to commit to such a project. It is with the Rio Tinto parent company that this important deal must be finalized. Rio Tinto must finally play its part to make people forget the missteps that have delayed the project for so many decades. But faced with the determination of the transitional authorities and the interest of a now well-informed public opinion on the matter, it is putting its credibility and its continued presence in Guinea and even beyond on the line.
Everything the Ministry of Mines is doing right now is because we have a president today who is committed to this approach. All the credit must go to the head of state. It is his personal determination. As Minister of Mines, I was amazed one day. The head of state called me into his office to tell me, "Mr. Minister, I can't sleep." "Excellency, why?" he told me that we don't know how much mineral is leaving the national territory. And that day, I told my entire team that if he can't sleep because of this, we need to know.